have all of you here, and we're more happy to have Dr. Tanya Jakimow from UNSW Sydney. You've seen a bio. I'm assuming you've seen a bio, that's why you're also here, motivated by the bio. So I'm not going to repeat the bio. She's done. She's obviously been extremely productive across a breadth of topics, and which is what makes this work fascinating as well. Personally, for us, she was one of the few researchers who we found also works on ward councils, and it's an neglected topic which I think both of we all share. And so that was the impetus in some ways to reach out to, and I'm glad that this trip has worked out, and I'm really grateful that despite everything you made it here and sharing this work, and we'll have more discussions subsequently. So it's flows yours.
Thank you so much, Uncle, and thank you so much for inviting me here. Uncle reached out to me after a paper in EPW, and since then I've been reading the wonderful work that he and his colleagues have been doing, and that's why I've made the trip to Ahmedabad on this particular occasion, and I'm really happy to be here and to have these conversations. I feel like I have a lot to learn from the people in this room, so I'm going to be presenting my research and hopefully doing so in a way that's open to critique and to further suggestions, so I look forward to the discussion. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about research that I've been doing primarily in Derived with women municipal councillors. Why don't I just click cool? Okay, the first thing I did was to switch it off, sorry. But I really want to start with a larger question, and this speaks to the future research agenda that I'm trying to put forward over the next couple of years. So there's a lot of research that's already been done at looking at women in politics, and women in politics at different levels. So looking at it from the municipal level, as we do, looking at the panchayats, and looking at them in national politics as well. And it seems to me that there are lots of, look, we already know a great deal about why women are underrepresented in politics at all of these levels. We know that women have less access to material and social resources, which is particularly important in countries where money matters in terms of standing for election and winning elections. We know that there are certain social norms and also ideas about femininities which prevent women from either being seen as credible candidates or from having the aspirations to stand themselves. And we also know that political parties throughout the world, and India is no exception, Australia is no exception, neither is Indonesia, have a major role in blocking women advancing through party politics. So there's all this research out here, yet I want to suggest that we haven't actually finished answering these questions, that there are different ways that we need to approach looking at women in politics from different angles. So what I'm going to do today is to really make a case for comparative research which helps us to look at these enduring questions in a fresh light. And I argue that comparative research can be really valuable for that. So first of all, I'm going to be presenting research findings from urban local body elections in Dehradun. Maybe this talk elsewhere, that's why it's a little bit India's genetic, sorry about that. There's a map where Krook is next as well. I apologise for that in advance, and I know that you know where Krook is. I'm then going to outline an analytical framework that tries to look at women in party politics from a different perspective. And then I'm going to map out this future research agenda, which is trying to rethink mechanisms of male dominance in party politics through collaborative and comparative research. Am I clear? My voice is often not very clear. Okay, so in terms of the research that I did, it was in Dehradun, in Inglehart, and the bulk of the research took place between 2015 and 2018. It was several trips back and forth between India and Australia during that period, and the research was largely ethnographic, meaning that I was involved in the daily lives of these women municipal councillors, as well as co-constructing profiles with them. So having a series of interviews in which they shared their life experiences, and then we co-constructed profiles of them. Now, one of the things that I found was that women were actually really engaged in undertaking activities, what I describe as political labour. So one of the things that I find in the literature is that there's a real tendency to look at how women are excluded from politics, to look at the way that they don't have an entry point. But actually, if we look at women's everyday labour and the everyday things that they do, then there is actually they're deeply involved in politics, and they're generating a lot of labour around that. And this is particularly the case at the grassroots. Now we know that women often present themselves as being social workers, and social workers who are there to help the people, social workers who are engaging in these everyday activities of brokerage and mediation in order to help citizens access entitlements. Now women do these activities as both a municipal councillor, and also they do these activities when they are just involved in party politics without actually being elected into a particular seat. Now men and women also do this social work role. I'm sure this is a term that you're familiar with. For women, what I would like to suggest is that often this identity of being a social worker is very deeply tied to their own self-narrative. So it's not a cynical representation for political purposes, as it is often presented in the literature, but actually it's tied to their very core of who they believe themselves to be. Now what this means is that they're deeply tied to doing this political labour, to engaging in this everyday forms of helping people, which not only which they enjoy, which they get a lot of benefits from, which builds their own personal sense of satisfaction and their own personal identity of being a social worker. But of course it also helps the political parties to which they are attached. They benefit a great deal from all this labour that these women are doing. Now once you are elected as a municipal councillor, this is where the workload often increases quite a lot, and there's a lot of expectations on you. And a lot of the women municipal councillors I spoke to were really critical of the unrealistic expectations of citizens to do so much for them. Yet they still undertook a lot of the labour in any case. They also became involved in doing larger infrastructural projects and doing larger things within their localities or within their wards. So a lot of them would build, would talk to the people and find out that they needed a road built in a particular area, and they would, put the proposal together, and they would, build the road, and they would get the contractors in. Yet when they needed the money to actually build the road, they didn't have access to these funding sources themselves. So instead they had to go through the MLA in order to get access to this funding. So what often happened is that women would go through all the labour of doing this road, and then the person who would get the credit, whose name would be on the signboard, would be the MLA. And the MLA in Uttarakhand, at least then, were always men. So what I guess I'm suggesting here is that women's political labour was generating a lot of support for the party and generating support for particular male party elites, but women were not. That's basically the point of this particular slide. Now, this is a form of empowerment for these women. Oh, yes?
Can you clarify in the political labour, especially when they are not elected? So what are the kind of activities they do?
Yeah, sure. So, for example, a form of political labour would be somebody comes up to a social worker and says that I need access to a pension, and would go through the process of helping them to get that pension. There would be some who would just stamp the form and send them on their way, but others would go to the trouble of filling out the form for them. Some of them would even take the form and take the person and drive them around to the various offices in which they could get the pension actually processed. And so what this does is, it's a form of labour in the sense that it takes up their time, and often it takes their resources in terms of their money for transport, etc. And it's political in the sense that it generates goodwill. So it generates goodwill for that particular individual as a social worker, and importantly in this context, it also generates goodwill for the political party. So, I've spoken to citizens who have been helped by, these party workers. There was one case where I was in a house and a Muslim man came, and he had a lot of trouble getting the Congress ward member to sign a simple form so that he could get electricity connected to his house. Now, I was with a BJP municipal councillor sitting in that room, and she immediately did it. She wrote out the letter. She did, went out of her way to help this man. And the Muslim man said, I would never vote for BJP. We all know why. They would never vote for BJP. But I would vote for this particular woman because, she is somebody who would always help me. Now, that particular case, the sentiment that is generated is for that individual because, there's so much more going on in the Muslim within the BJP dynamics. But in other cases, then it might not necessarily be that they would not vote for the BJP. They would still generate that kind of sentiment, that positive sentiment towards the BJP. Is that clear, that political labour? Okay, you can stop me at any time, obviously, if you have questions.
So a person who is used to mobilize people to come to political rallies.
Oh yes, thank you.
That would be an important part.
Yeah, this is something that I was going to get to in a moment, but I should have mentioned here as well. Yeah, absolutely. The women who are social workers are also the people who will encourage supporters to come, to get on buses, to come to political rallies. They themselves will go to political rallies. They themselves will be the face of the party and make sure that they can have that, what Tanya Jakimow describes as, that social energy. So generating this social energy around the party as well.
And another follow-up. So do they have party affiliations, or are they often, just helping out in the local area?
Yeah, this is a good question. All the women that I associated with were affiliated with the party. At the same time, when it comes to the election, some of them ran as independents for reasons that I will get to later. But it's not like that, I know that there's a lot of so-called brokers who are non-affiliated, and part of their power is almost that lack of affiliation. But I'm not talking about that here. I'm talking about women who are explicitly BJP, Congress, or PSP workers.
And do they have political aspirations, or they're just happy to be laborers on?
Oh, this is it's interesting. I'm going to get to this, because this is actually a really important question in terms of when they have aspirations and when those aspirations stop. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so what I argued, earlier is that this kind of social activity, or this kind of labour that they do, is a form of empowerment, in the sense that as women they're given this kind of public, this public persona. They're able to go out and do things that they wouldn't do in their daily lives otherwise. And I argue that this is a form of empowerment because it gives them a new sense of possibility in terms of who they can be, or who they want to be. So, in terms of often it comes with a particular social position, so that social position might be as a social worker, or it could be as an elected municipal councillor. And so this gives them a valid social position from which they can act. It is a social position which has some recognisability, some social recognisability. It can also be an expansion in self-imaginaries, and this is where the question of political aspiration becomes important. So we all know that women are reserved a third of seats in all local governance, and it's a third in the cities in Uttarakhand, 50 in the villages. And so what this does is it allows them a sense of having, okay, so maybe I could become a municipal councillor, I could become a parsha. And so this can spark a whole new way of thinking about themselves, this whole new self-imaginary. It also gives them opportunities for self-enactment and effective reaffirmation. So what I mean by this is it allows them to engage in activities which reaffirm that, okay, I can be this party worker, I can be this, important person within the locality. Sometimes we can have a sense of who we are. I can think of myself as being highly adventurous, but unless I have the opportunity to jump off a cliff on a bungee cord, then I might not have the ability to actually experience that and feeling that. So that effective reaffirmation is important. I'm not in any way adventurous, by the way, at all. Okay. So this is a framework that I developed earlier, and it's in an earlier paper in relation to Indonesia. But what I'm trying to argue here is that reservations encourage these effective investments in self-imaginaries in ways that both empower and exploit women. So what I mean by this is that women become really attached to this idea about who they can be, who they are. I'm a social worker first and foremost, or I am somebody who can become, a political leader. And this can be empowering in the ways that I just mentioned. At the same time, what I want to argue now is that it can also exploit women, that it is a means through which women are exploited. Okay, so there's a map of Uttarakhand, in case you didn't know where it is. So this was the kind of findings of my research with women municipal councillors while they were in their third to their fifth year of their 5-year term. Sorry, their second to their fifth year. Then I went back to Uttarakhand twice last year. I went back in April in 2018, and this is when we thought the elections were going to be held. So during April, I was working with an NGO, and we were having these pre-election workshops for women, basically for women who we thought were interested in running to be parshads, giving them the tools in order to do so. Now this was a time when we thought the elections were coming up, and there was a lot of discussion about the ticket, like who's going to get the party ticket in order to contest these elections. And there was a lot of anxiety amongst the women as well in terms of will they get the ticket, who's going to get the ticket, and so on. Now the elections didn't actually take place until November 2018. They were delayed for reasons which I won't get into. And during this activity, during this period, there's a lot of sort of kind of an upsurge in this political activity. So women were going out of their ways to attend all the rallies, they were going out of their ways to make sure they were bringing supporters, going out of their way to reach out to the citizens and the voters, most importantly. Okay, so many of these women, and this is Anuradha, who is, had been working for the party for about 20 years by the time I met her. I met her for the first time in April last year. And she had devoted decades of her life to helping the party. She was one of these people who always mobilised supporters and did social work on a daily basis. And she said that she had, she'd been sacrificing time with her family and her, while the children were still young. Now her children had grown up, they were in a position where they had left their house, they were independent. And she thought that now was the time that she wanted to actually stand for election, that she wanted to become a municipal councillor. And so she was really gunning to get the party ticket. So just to make sure that I've got I'm coming in the right place. Yeah. And there were lots of women like Anuradha who had done a lot of work in the locality. And I think this is a question as well in terms of how women's political activity is structured around their life cycle, and how we need to prepare women earlier on they're unable to take on these positions to be in a position where they can be politically effective. But I'm digressing a little bit. Now, there were also women municipal councillors who had been councillor for 1 or 2 terms, who had been investing a lot of energy during their terms in order to get re-elected. And so they too most of them were very confident that as sitting parshas or as sitting municipal councillors, that they would be given the party ticket. Now, unfortunately, that didn't happen in Dewi. In fact, this was a particularly bad election for party tickets to be given to the wives of party workers. So reserve seats going to the wives of party workers rather than to women who were active politically, party workers themselves. And it was also a really bad election in terms of sitting parshas or sitting municipal councillors who thought they would get the ticket, the seat becomes unreserved, and suddenly it's a man who's holding this ticket. So when I came back in November, and by the time I came back, the tickets had already been decided, unfortunately, and there was a lot of anger, and a lot of tears, and a lot of kind of depression around this. Now, what was interesting was their different responses to this. So this is one municipal councillor. She was a 2-term municipal councillor. She had won in an unreserved seat in the previous election, but they decided to give the seat to somebody else in this particular election. Okay, now what was kind of interesting with her reaction was that first of all she was very angry, and she was saying that she'd been denied the ticket even though she'd given so much of her heart and soul to the party. But in the end she said that, okay, but first and foremost I'm a social worker. Actually it doesn't matter that much, when all is done, it's just a matter of whether I have the stamp or not. I'm going to continue to do my work, I'm going to continue to be a social worker. And this was intimately tied to her social identity. In fact, if you were to say to partner, I'm sorry, but you cannot become not be a social worker, then this would completely destroy her sense of who she was within the social world. This is her effective investment in herself. So anyway, she decided not to run as an independent. She did think about it for a while. And instead she campaigned for the person who ran this is a BJP worker, for the BJP ticket. She says, I'm still going to continue this work. The majority of people are women, and I should also mention that these photos, do not relate to the text or what I'm saying. These are just examples of photos, just so that you don't think I'm referring to this person having said that. Okay. There were also lots of women like Anuradha who had not been municipal councillors and who had been really gunning to get the party ticket and investing all of their energies in making sure that they can do so. And then the party said, well, no, we're going to give it to a man, and we're giving it to the wife of this party worker. And they're like, okay, it's okay, no problem. I'm just going to continue my social worker. This sort of gets down to the kind of emotional repertoires that women are expected to have. Like, they're expected to want to aspire to be a social worker, but actually having political aspirations, aspirations to be in so-called dirty politics, is something that is against that emotional repertoire. Like, it's against that idea of, social norms. And so for them, whatever they were feeling on the inside, whatever they had access to in terms of their own thoughts on the situation, they would say, no problem, like, I'll just campaign for whoever, got the party to get instead. There was also a very interesting division of labour within these election campaigns. So I didn't actually campaign for any male candidates. Yes?
So, did you find a lot of cases where people shifted to another party?
There was
As a
one.
reaction?
There was one woman I know who had done it, and there were many men who had done it. So yes, that was. There were responses where people would shift party allegiances, but actually the person who shifted the party allegiance had decided beforehand, the woman, for whatever reason. But men, there was a lot of kind of shifting around at that particular time.
Shift is higher among men as compared to women?
I do. And this is where we were talking before about the value of ethnographic fieldwork, is to try to understand, what's going on a very intimate detail. But I don't have statistics or anything in terms of, how that translated on a statewide basis. Anecdotally, what people were saying is that men were more likely to get angry than women. That they were more likely to A, run as an independent, or B, to shift their party allegiances. But my evidence is only anecdotal, so that's a kind of a limitation that I have. Yeah. But that's even interesting, whether or not it's true. Whether it's true or not that men do get more angry than women. What's interesting is that was the kind of social expectation. That men would get angry, that they would, lash out, and they would, anyway pursue their political aspirations, where it was expected that women would, just get on with it. Okay, so as I mentioned, I didn't actually campaign with any men, but I did have a student intern with me at the time who was a man, and he campaigned for a male candidate. And he was talking about how the campaign worked in relation to the male campaigning. So one of the things that women say, which is a real strength of being a woman candidate, is that you can go into the homes of people. That you can go in and you can connect directly with the women of the household. You can enter the house and you can talk to them, and you can try to convince them of your, to convince them to vote for you, or to convince them that you're a candidate worth supporting. Now, in male candidates, they're unable to the same extent to do that kind of labour, right? Like, they're unable to kind of generate those sentiments in a more intimate setting, such as the house. So often it was the women, so there was a large group of men, and then within that large group of men, there were 3 women, and it was the 3 women who would go up to the house, who would knock on the door, and who would then, talk to the women at the house, and the candidate would be just by them, and then he would kind of say his pitch, and that was how they went door to door. At the same time as there was a large group of men who were outside and who were having a good time, basically, during the election campaign. The parties afterwards, the men were at the back drinking and eating. I'm sure you've got a sense of how the election campaigns go. And the women would be kind of not doing that to the same extent. So what I want to suggest is that even within the election campaigning itself, that there's a division of labour, especially a division of effective labour. And so by effective labour, I'm talking about this labour of generating positive support, this labour of getting people to connect with your message, getting people to identify with you, with your party, with your political support. Sorry, I'm pointing at you.
No. How much do these people get paid? Like, what is the difference in pay being a social worker versus a party candidate? Like, if you win in the election, what is the salary?
Okay, this is interesting. So in terms of, if I understand the question right, so what's the difference between being a social worker who is unelected compared to being a municipal councillor who is elected?
Yeah, in terms of revenue.
In terms of remuneration. It costs more as a pasha. It costs more to be a municipal councillor. So in Dewi, they don't have an honorarium for municipal councillors. And this is something that women in particular have been really hurt by and have been struggling to advocate for. So they don't get any allowance. So everything in terms of the phone and the transport, etc., has to come out of their own pocket. Now, if it comes out of your own pocket and you're a man and you have a business or you have a job, this is one thing. When it comes out of your pocket and you're a woman and you have to ask your husband or your sons for financial support, this is an entirely different thing, right? Like, it changes the dynamics of it. Now I do know some women municipal councillors who had a set up a beauty parlour, for example, so that she could fund her activities as a municipal councillor.
So they don't get paid at all?
They don't get paid. Now they've been advocating quite strongly for this within the Dewi Municipal Corporation, and they had offered some petty amount, like some really small amount, and they said, stuff, you're not taking this seriously. That was the year before the election. Now we've got a new breed of women municipal councillors in there who do not have that 5 years of experience or 10 years of experience, and so I don't know where those advocacy efforts are at the moment. I guess I'll find out when I go back. Yeah. But very frustrating, right? It's really annoying. So this kind of effectively, what I'm suggesting again is that there's this kind of division where it's the women who are doing a lot of this political labour, but who is benefiting? The person who got the party ticket, rather than the woman who's been doing this social work for ages. Now there were women who were really angry, who were white hot angry. And they were actually like, yes.
Sorry, so they just wanted to ask, is there a difference that you saw when the candidate was woman and the surrounding, the supporters, say for example, were men and women both, versus when the candidate was man and the supporters were men?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a big difference. And as I said, I didn't campaign myself personally for men. But what I found in the women campaigns is that the woman candidate was always at the front. Even when, sometimes you have strong husband-wife teams, and even when there's strong husband-wives teams, it was inevitably the woman who was doing most of the door-to-door campaigning at the front. And then you would have lots of women usually behind her, like just outside the door, kind of offering visual support and all the support that she has. And then you would often have far fewer men who would then, they often had very important roles, like in terms of being there to be either that kind of party spokesperson to kind of talk about the particular candidate. And I guess they had sometimes they had more kind of credibility in relation to the voter in terms of that formal sense, whereas the women behind her were more the people who helped her in her everyday activities, and that were that kind of visual proof of being there. But it was definitely the women candidates themselves who were right at the front of that entourage. Yeah. Okay, so there were some women who were really, really angry at being denied the party ticket. So this is one woman who had worked for the party again for decades, and then her family, her children had just married and were now independent, and so she wanted to get the party ticket. Now she was denied the party ticket, like she was promised the party ticket, but she had just so much support, right? And so the party had done all of their surveys or whatever, and they had promised her the ticket right up until the final day of nomination. And then on the final day of nomination, they denied her the party ticket, and they gave it to a male party worker. Now, there was lots of gossip in Derridon about buying party tickets, but the particular gossip around this candidate was that he had threatened suicide if he wasn't given the party ticket. He said that he's going to kill himself, that at his age, that this was his final opportunity to take the first step on his political career. Now, he was only a couple of years older than the woman candidate, Dewi, is a pseudonym. Yet her own kind of, appeal saying, I too want to become, like this too is my first step in my political career, did not have the same kind of effect on the party leaders. It didn't kind of, change their decision making. She also, because she is a woman and because of her, not because she is a woman, but because of her standing as a particular kind of woman, a particular class of woman, she herself would never contemplate threatening suicide. This is something that would not be part of her toolkit, I guess, in order to convince the party leaders. And if she had, it would also have a different kind of reaction, right? Like a male says that, a man says that he's going to commit suicide, is one thing. When a woman says it, then it can often be trivialized. So anyway, she wasn't given the party ticket, and this is kind of an expression of the anger that she had. So she decided to run as an independent, and she had a very successful campaign, and she only lost the ticket by she only lost the vote by 150 votes. So she was 150 votes shy of beating the other candidates. Now, her party candidate, the BJP candidate, came third. which kind of suggests to me that, you know, the decision that the party makers made was not actually based around electability, it was based around something else. And she was so angry that, you know, if I had the votes of those party faithful, then I would easily have trounced it in. I'll just give you a second to read. Can you read that? Is that clear? Now, what I found kind of surprising is that this wasn't a quote taken just before the Lok Sabha elections. But this is Dewi talking to us within 3 or 4 days of her losing the election. So she was really devastated with this particular interview. And she had been expelled from the BJP because, you know, she had run as an independent. So they just automatically expel anybody who ran as an independent. But she knew that the BJP would want her back because the Lok Sabha elections were coming up. And so, you know, they needed the support of the people in the locality. But what is really interesting is that she said even at this point that she would go back to the party. She would go back to the party because she has this love for the party. You know, her whole sense of identity was tied to herself as being a social worker and a party worker for the BJP. And so we will go back. What's also kind of interesting is this sense of, you know, we are also a little emotional. We will easily melt. So this sense that, okay, so the party can just come back at the later stage and then convince them, and the women will get their anger, will put the past in the past, and will look to a happier future. So this is, again, a kind of a sense of the way that the party can, I don't want to say manipulate because that suggests that it's intentional, but can, you know, use the kind of emotions of the women in order to maintain their support when they need it for Lok Sabha elections, at the same time as deny them the party ticket when they want it, right? So, you know, they're not giving women the actual power when they request it, but what they are doing is saying, okay, we're going to effectively tie you to us, and we want your support, we want your labour when we need it. There were lots and lots of women like this. Lots of women who supported their parties in the elections, and there's lots of, you know, justifications that they have for it as well. Okay, so what I want to suggest from this admittedly quite a limited study, and you know, that's why I've got propositions up here rather than findings. These are still things that I'm trying to grapple with in terms of their significance on a wider basis. First of all, I want to suggest that this effective investment in the idea of self, like this investment in this idea that I can be a party worker or I can be an elected official, encourages women to actually do all of these activities, to do all of this political labour. Now, political labour doesn't necessarily have to be negative in itself for the women. As I said, it can also be empowering. But I also want to suggest that they're not actually receiving the rewards for this political labour. That they're doing all of this, they're generating all this social energy and this political capital, but they're not the ones who are benefiting from it. Rather, it is appropriated by male party elites. It's appropriated by people who do contest the seats for the tickets for the wards that they are denied. So what I want to suggest is that we need to therefore stop looking at the exclusion of women in party politics as if that is the only thing that we should be looking at. Instead, we need to consider their adverse incorporation. So adverse incorporation this is a term out of development studies used in an economic sense, but I want to try to apply it to the political sense as well. In terms of the way that they are incorporated within party politics, but under terms which are disadvantageous for them, which don't actually benefit them or which benefit other people. So it's part of the whole process of how, you know, people's privilege can be reproduced. So, for example, the economic position of elites is advantaged by the adverse incorporation of labourers. Labourers who are paid a less wage for their goods means that the person who has the capital is able to benefit from the surplus value that labour creates. So I want to suggest that we can use this to understand political women in politics.
Sorry. So I just had like one question. I don't know if you went into families and if you know who's the political decision maker and if it's the man who's deciding how the family votes. And I'm just extending that to say if it's the man who decides how the family votes, then what the party is doing is sort of rational. And if the man is, so I'm just saying if the man is who decides in a family who votes, then what the party is doing is quote unquote rational, because if the man is more likely to vote for another man and the man decides for the entire family, how the entire family votes, then the party picking up males to represent itself sort of makes sense, and maybe they're just trying to win. In the example that you gave, that was not true, but I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I don't have, like, my data is not on how people vote, like, I don't do that at all. I think that, but you know, Lofty, for example, I'm sure they have data on this kind of stuff, you know, in terms of decision making within the family, in terms of who votes. I would be surprised that in derived, like, I mean, this is just my sense of the place, that men are deciding, you know, for the whole family in terms of who they vote for. I mean, that, yeah, I mean, but I don't have any evidence to back that up. Yeah, so I guess I don't have evidence to respond to your question, but I would say that women were able to generate a huge amount of support for, you know, as in the case of the independents who ran, and there was more than one woman who ran as an independent and generated huge amounts of votes in unreserved seats, and there were women who won from unreserved seats as well, none of the independents, unfortunately. So, I mean, I think that there's a bit of a, like, I don't want to say it's a myth, but there is research out there which looks at women's electability. And the research on a very general level, and of course this has to be broken down for particular pockets in particular areas, but the overall general research suggests that women don't lack electability. Like that is not actually why they're not put forward for party seats. When women are actually put forward for seats, they win to the same extent that men do, if they are put forward by their parties. Yeah. I don't think men only vote for men, but maybe I'm wrong. I wish women only voted for women. I didn't say that out loud. I only vote for women. No, I don't. I only vote. Okay. But yeah, no, it's an interesting question. Like that whole like how electoral dynamics works is so important to put into the overall picture. But I haven't got that research. Okay, so I want to develop this analytical framework. And, you know, as I said, I've only worked in derived, so I want to see how this applies more generally, and whether this can be a useful framework, not only for looking at women in local urban body elections, but also looking at women in other political contexts, including in Australia. So, what is important about adverse incorporation is that when we only focus on women's exclusion, then we think that it assumes that including women in politics is the solution, right? That all we have to do is just include them in. And reservations is supposed to do that, for example, and reservations is effective at doing that. However, that's not the only problem. We also need to look at the terms of their inclusion, the terms of the way that they're incorporated in. Now, I suggest that there are different questions that we need to ask. We need to look at the mechanisms that encourage women to perform political labour. So how are they convinced to actually run for election or to, you know, support political parties? Look at the sort of political and symbolic capital that they generate, as well as the mechanisms of dispossession of that political capital. So how that capital benefits other people other than themselves. I use primitive accumulation in a particular weird sense here, but what I want to try to understand is, can we look at this through economic frameworks which could try to understand how men benefit from the labour that women generate, how they appropriate that labour, and then use that to maintain their own dominance. That's kind of my proposition that I'm putting out there. Uncle, how long do I have?
2 or 1:15, so I'm good.
Does that include questions as well?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Now, guys, I'm going to speed along because I would like some questions. Now, I do want to look at this in comparative perspective, and this is something that I've been starting to do in Indonesia with some Indonesian colleagues, where they have a similar kind of set of circumstances. So they have reservations that require women to contest elections. Women are convinced to contest elections. They are put in positions that are unwinnable on the ballot paper, and then they invest all of this energy and finances, and then they ultimately lose the election. And this is talking about how women often, when they have been convinced to campaign and to stand for election, how that when they lose, and sometimes they lose very badly because they've been put in these unwinnable positions on the ballot paper, that they become humiliated and they commit suicide. So there's some really negative consequences to be had from women's adverse incorporation into politics. But, I mean, this is just my kind of pet project, I guess, at the moment. But what I really want to do is to broaden this out and to start thinking about, you know, women in politics in a different way. And I want to look at, you know, a lot of the theories that we have or the concepts that we use to examine women in politics is still predominantly from a Euro-American experience. frameworks, right? You know, the theoretical frameworks. So what I want to do is I want to work with colleagues to develop theory from Asian perspectives. And these are some of the research areas which I think are ripe for exploration comparatively in order to undertake that work. I won't go into them, but they can be questions. So, and I put IIM, I'm going to here maybe a little bit optimistically, but trying to, I guess, suggest that what I'm trying to do at the moment is to build a collaboration of scholars working across Asia to try to work towards increasing women's representation in politics, targeting at the 2024 elections. So I've just come back from Indonesia where I've been having very similar conversations with Indonesian colleagues. LIPI is the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, Universitas Sumatera Utara, are all kind of interested in working with researchers from India in particular, and also researchers in Australia to try to redevelop our ways of looking at women in politics from an Asian perspective. Institute of Social Sciences that is in New Delhi, I don't know if anybody works with them, they're also keen to engage in this collaborative project. And Pragati, this is more an acknowledgement that they are my collaborators in Dehradun, and a lot of the research that I have presented to you today was in collaboration with them, and I couldn't do this without them. And then, I know that you are already doing great research in this area, so this is my pitch, is what it is, to see whether there are ways of also bringing you onto this. And I think that is me and ready for questions. Thank you. Yes.
Just saying about suggestion more than a question would be what I want to say. The context that you took is mostly dominated by the national parties.
Yeah.
Whereas in some other states in India, you have regional parties which provide much more opportunities for women. So I come from a place called as Odisha, which last year they made it mandatory that 33% of the assembly seats would be reserved for women.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
In 2018, just before the legislative assembly elections this year, which were held along with the national assembly, national elections. So, and the Chief Minister himself gave about 50% of the tickets to women in the elections. So now it would be interesting to know whether those were also wives of party workers or those were new people who had come from the grassroots, and did it impact transfer of workers from one party to another. So if a woman felt that in a national party I was not being able to get the kind of recognition I would, then will I jump ship to the regional party where I am more likely to get representation, and therefore the labor and the consequence of that labor will then change.
Yeah, excellent. I think this, your comment really points to the potential of comparison within India, because India, has many different, permutations of party politics, and legally, and also, norms as well. And I think it's a fascinating question. My point is really, can we use that framework to raise different issues in a research?
The question's exactly when you talk about the fact that they are okay with the fact that they accept it. So once these reservations come into being, then is there a difference in the way they look at the particular national party, centrally versus in the state? Or they say that in the state, this party is giving me this kind of recognition. So then why will I not want to have that with another party, for example?
And answering that question, I can't answer that question. Obviously, I've never done research. So and I've only done research in Dehradun, where there is only the national parties. That's the main game in town, plus the BSP.
It's BJD in Odisha, which has done the Biju Janata. It's the ruling party there. They have done.
Yeah, but your point was that there are many state parties as well, but there are regional parties, which is not the case in Uttarakhand. Right? They have one, but it's like toothless, whatever. So I think it's a really interesting question which could be answered empirically, and I think answering that empirically, if we were to compare, for example, Uttarakhand, where there's really only two major parties vying for power, and then Orissa, it was Orissa you said, right?
Orissa, yes.
That has multiple parties. Does that affect women's political labour? Like, that's really interesting. We could only answer that comparatively. I can't answer it here, but I think it's a good question. It's a research project.
Follow up to that, it's very interesting because one aspect of being a council is also to see if you have mobility or not to become, and that mobility sometimes means becoming an MLA. So in this context where women actually have this mandated kind of reservation, even at, let's say, a higher level above councillors, I mean, that would definitely change the motivations, how they look at the job and the work as a councillor.
Yeah, and I think it would also change the perspective of the political elite, right? Because then they also have to think about, okay, so we have to nurture these political cadre at the local level in order, because we need them, you know, to hold these seats at the state level. I'm putting together a project proposal at the moment. It's on Indonesia and Sri Lanka, unfortunately not India due to the collaboration involved. But you know, we're looking at this pathway from grassroots politics up, right? Because what I found also, I mean, one of their frustrations is that there's really competent women at the municipal level, and yet they cannot move forward, they cannot move up. They're never given the ticket for the mayor, you know, they're never given the ticket for the MLA seats, unless they, you know, come from a political, you know, dynasty or what have you. So trying to understand these pathways, I think, is a really important research question. It's one of the questions we had up there. Because also I think that, you know, maybe this is something that you can talk, you know, tell me that, you know, there seems to be a negative association with women who do get involved in grassroots politics, you know, dirty politics, which then hinders their actual ability to be credible candidates at the state level. I've seen research on this, but I haven't done it myself, but that's something we want to test, actually.
Is there, I mean, it's a very, maybe a very simplistic question. Is there a work which tries to figure out who participates in politics and whether the reasons or factors are different for men and women at the individual household, regional levels? Is there work in that area?
Yeah, there is some limited work. So Ashana Ghosh and Stephanie Lamaral, they've done some work which looked at municipal councillors across, I think it was 4 states in India. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this work. It's now quite an older piece, 2005. But they talk about how, yeah, they look at exactly this kind of thing. So, you know, what are the educational differences? What are the factors in terms of the family support that they have? You know, there are certain criteria that women must have, such as family support, which is, you know, can kill a women's political career but will not have an effect on a man's political career. There's also research which, you know, looks at women's, kind of in the sense that I do, like in terms of their aspirations and how the political styles that they develop and the idea around them being who they are. So Manuela Ciotti has looked at this, Tabini Bedi has looked at it in relation to Shiv Sena women. There seems to be more research on this in relation to women political actors than there are about male political actors. And I think this is interesting in itself in that, you know, why are we not, like I don't know if there's an assumption about why men become involved in politics. Whereas it's always a question with women, like, you know, they have something to be explained, but for men, there's a, you know, kind of, after political economic power, I don't know what the explanations are, but I think it's a really interesting question, and it would be a nice complement to that body of literature that's already out there, actually, to understand political motivations. There is one paper, and it's not in the Indian context, it's looking at US, Australia and the UK, but it looks at pathways of it's pathways of politicians, they're all men, you know, this is the generic politician, is nearly always women, and they look at it from, you know, the motivations that they bring and why they became involved. But his paper, when he presents it, he says at the front that this is not research that is done. Like we don't actually ask questions about our politicians because we just look at them cynically. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good research project.
So just adding on to the motivations bit. So I don't understand why, I don't understand women's motivations, but the motivation of the political system seems to be to gain power and to gain connections. But I don't know whether women do it for the same reasons as men. And so earlier when you were talking about salaries for the councillors, the male councillors would not have cared because they would have done enough favor exchange and made enough money out of the system. And one, I don't know whether women can make money out of the system and whether they do make money out of the system. So
there's a lot of variation. I'm going to tackle the second part first, like in terms of do women make money, can they make it as easily as men? And it's very various, like it varies across Derived, and Derived is a small place. Like when I was doing my research, there were only 30 or 27 women municipal councillors. And within them, they had different kind of approaches to whether or not they would attempt to make money. Some of the women complained that they were unable to make money, in the way that men did, which assumed that they wanted to, but that they faced barriers in actually doing so. And part of these barriers are because they don't have that initial kind of shop front or whatever that would help them to broker those deals and contracts in a way that they could generate income from it. In saying that, it's a complicated picture because many of the women are in these, husband-wife teams. So there is money that can be generated through that. But this is not something that I have a huge, amount of data on. So I never published something that said that, but that's from what I gleaned in the field. In terms of you also mentioned about the aspirations, why do they want to do it? This is a question that they present another paper where they describe themselves as, being servants, like having to do everything for citizens and then having to fork out all this money and they're like, when I went back in 2017, so this is the year before the election, and they just spent the last year bitching to me, sorry, apologies, but complaining so much about the work that they had to do, and all the money they had to pay out, right? And then, some of them, but the majority said, yeah, I'll still continue, I want to become a municipal councillor next year as well. Some of them said no, but all of them were disappointed when they didn't get the party ticket, right? They all kind of, there was a part of them that still wanted to be a municipal councillor, even though they knew the job was awful, a lot of the time. And I think this speaks to the kind of ways that we do become attached to this idea of this identity. And after 5 years, your identity is intimately connected to your status as a municipal councillor. When I went, it was so depressing. Nearly all of my friends lost the election or weren't given party tickets. And so when I was going around after the elections, and I could see them, and suddenly they were no longer a pasha, right? They were just a normal person. It's just devastating, right? They'd lost who they were. They had lost their pure sense of self. So I think that kind of, that's what I mean by that kind of effective investment in this sense of who they are, which I think is a very strong motivation, which is maybe under-recognised. It's so depressing, that election. Yes.
I done some work that's more around reservation and at the Lok level. And one idea that I had was to sort of look at the question of descriptive versus substantive representation from a more hegemony lens, to look at how hegemonies work. So for example, the example that you gave of a lot of partners or women who are wives of current municipal parshals getting the ticket for the party. So something like a hegemonic lens would sort of explain that, so to speak, that descriptively there might still be those number of women, but substantively the women who actually worked on ground did not get party tickets. So it's sort of again about what kind of women are ultimately reaching, and then their performances get measured basis of certain economic indicators, and the women who were actually really working on the field would definitely have ended up performing much better because they had those social connections already. So to sort of explain this, I used the lens of hegemonies, where you can see that a certain common sense rule, for example, the way Prita ma'am pointed out that this would be a rational thing to do. So it sort of gets internalized in the institutional mechanism of the party, saying that we have to prefer men or their wives. So it's not so much preferring men per se, but more a certain kind of hegemonic masculinity. That sort of rule that determines who is going to be more sort of easy to subvert or who's going to be more obedient, etc. So those kind of rules which can lead us to understand more, not just in terms of male and female in the party politics, but more in terms of the performance of that particular masculinity that the party might be favoring. So I don't know if that's useful to you, but maybe it could be a way to sort of also think about it as not just in terms of gender divisions, but also performances of particular kind of masculinities.
Oh yeah, it's completely relevant, and this is your research sounds great, and I think it's great looking at it from a hegemonic view and looking at the emphasised femininities alongside those hegemonic masculinities in terms of what can be successful and what does femininity, those emphasised femininities look like in a political leader, and how does that actually constrain or enable those political leaders to actually do things, actually make decisions which then would lead to more substantive representation. And I think you're right that a lot of it is about, common sense in that Gramscian sort of, terms like that. I mean, we should just be putting forward men, and that it's not something that has any rational calculation behind it. It's just the common sense of the party. So that's a really useful comment. Thank you. I think that's a great way of looking at it. In terms of that issue of substantive versus descriptive versus representation, I agree that there's, I think one of the biggest feminist projects that's been in terms of women in politics is looking at substantive representation and trying to understand what happens when women get elected and what kinds of women are being elected. I and a few of my colleagues are trying to throw that open a little bit and not make any, and I agree that women on the grassroots have a different kind of connection than women who come from political families. At the same time, I also have colleagues who have been doing research with women who come from political families who actually develop different sensibilities from being in a political family, which actually makes them more effective in some ways. Okay? So I don't think it's that they're always bad and that women who come from the grassroots are always good. I think they come with different sensibilities and different kind of strategies and also different capabilities. I also saw that myself. Like many of the women that I met for the first time, 2 years into their 5-year term, did run because of their husbands. And they had very little competency, but then they developed this as they went along. So I think we can't also look at it in static terms. We also cannot assume that women who come from the grassroots do make those decisions or push for legislation that does support women as well. Because, unfortunately the record's really bad, as you probably know, across the world of women being successful with pushing through legislation. And the women in, Derived, we had this workshop on strategic and practical interests, right, women's interests. And they hadn't even thought about pursuing women's interests in a strategic or a practical sense, really beyond all that music. Anyway, yeah, but thank you, that was a great point.
Here we are defining exclusion as it could have an adverse impact if they are excluded as the denial of ticket. But then it might also happen that they are being rewarded differently. And so that we refer back to the 6 stages of self-becoming of a partial, if we refer to one of the other papers. So they might be just bypassing the second stage of actually becoming a partial, but the other rewards or the other mechanisms could also lead to self-actualization and them taking up more positive dispositions in a different manner. So that also, the point that I'm trying to make is that denial of a ticket might not lead to as many adverse impacts as we might be positioning here. They might be getting rewarded in a different way through either maybe some monetary reward or maybe different position in the party circuit from there. So we might also have to.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think on an individual level, it's completely the case, and that's why I talk about how it both empowers and how it can also exploit. That empower section is really important. Like women, I don't think any of the women would, even though they complain, 20 years I've been working for the party and this is how they treated me, none of them would take back those 20 years. Like none of them would say, I don't want to, I wouldn't have done this. One of the women, it's beautiful, she said, I am who I am because of the party. Like she said it in those terms. Something like this, right?
And so the party membership itself has given her a possibility of self-actualization, a different role.
Absolutely, but this I think is at the individual level, and what I'm interested in terms of the adverse incorporation element is looking at the structural level. So although women may still benefit and individual women may be empowered, structurally I think the way that women are incorporated on a more general level continues to marginalise women and to the advantage of male party elites. So this is a really valuable comment because I hadn't actually thought that through in my head. Yeah, but that's the kind of difference, the structural versus the individual. That's a good thing.
Thanks. I find your concept of adverse incorporation really powerful. I was trying to think if there is a way to outline the spatiality of this whole process. So, as one gets closer to the process of actually deciding who gets the ticket, there might be a mobilization of both human and non-human actors. I'm thinking from Thrift and Dewi's perspective that might actually create a specific kind of space that marginalizes a certain kind of bodies, which in this case happens to be feminine bodies.
Yeah.
So, is there a way to sort of direct one's attention to the participating in construction of this space. So where is the decision actually being taken? Is it in a public setting, or what kind of events and what kind of processes come together so that this decision is taken? And are there contestation around the space itself? Are women saying that this thing was decided in this person's house and likewise, etc., etc.? And I mean, questions of this kind could I'm just thinking maybe there is a spatial sort of dimension to this concept. If we start thinking along these lines, using the concept of adverse incorporation.
This is great. I hadn't thought about it in this way, but as you were talking, I was thinking about just because I only managed to be part, or not to be, but be part, to observe in the real sense, one situation where they were selecting the mayor ticket, right? Because I was teaching while they were selecting all the party tickets, and so I couldn't get there in time to watch, to see that process. But at the mayor party tickets, I was in the big BJP hall. I saw the BJP one, and the way that women were positioned at the front of the stage, and even the way that people moved in their body language, and yeah, it's really rich. I guess my response is yes. I think that would be a really good way to do it. I haven't done it, but you've helped me to try to bring myself back to that scene and try to think about it in those terms. So yeah, it's good. Thank you.